A dungeon crawler with adorable stuffed animals that can teach your child important morals? Sounds pretty amazing. But does it live up to the hype? Let's discuss 5 things about stuffed Fables. In a game of stuffed Fables, each player controls an adorable stuffy. They're trying to protect their little girl through a series of stories about her growing up and maturing. The game is played inside a booklet, with player and enemy movement handed on a map to the left, and all the storyline and special effects in the book on the right. On a player's turn, they draw 5 dice from a dice bag. Black dice are added to a threat track, activating or spawning enemies at the end of your turn. The other colored dice are used as you please. Any die can be used to move, rolling it to see how far you go. Yellow dice can be used to search for more items, green and red dice to attack, and purple dice are wild. Maps within a scenario vary wildly, but in general you'll be trying to defeat any enemies on the board and having encounters with characters. You generally win a story if you can accomplish all your objectives without all of your stuffies being knocked down. That said, each story generally has a better or worse outcome depending on how long you took and whether your little girl is still sleeping or woke up. Our number 5 is mixed, and that's how the enemies activate in the game. There's a fair amount of variety between enemies, and each enemy even has some variety in how they'll activate turn to turn, which is resolved with a simple die roll. The AI is really quick, which is perfect for a game targeted towards families and kids. They move toward the closest stuffy and attack them. That being said, there are some problems with the system. Enemies have consistently high, non-random damage values, and because stuffies can only hold 1 die to defend with, if they're ganged up by 2 enemies at once, they'll often lose all their stuffing and be knocked down, leading to a death spiral that can be very frustrating. Our number 4 is another mix, and that's the story being told by the game itself. Each story is an episode, focusing on one big achievement in a child's life. Like in this case, for the first story, getting a big girl bed instead of a crib. Tonally, the game is all over the place. You have stories being told that are realistically targeted toward a 4 or 5-year-old, but gameplay that's much more complicated. There's also some really disturbing elements that might not be appropriate for the age the game seems to be targeted toward. Well, the mix points just keep on coming, and this time we're talking about the characters you control in the game. Each of the stuffies is uniquely adorable and has a personality in the story, which is a nice touch. They also have their own unique abilities that make them play slightly differently. And as a given story progresses, the players will earn new items to increase their character's power and abilities. But on the negative side, hearts are in very short supply in the stories, so you generally don't get to activate your character's special abilities very often. Also, unlike most dungeon crawlers, even Mice and Mystics, there is no progression from game to game, so the way your characters play at the beginning is exactly the same way they'll play at the end. A little disappointing. We finally get a full-on pro with number 2, and that's the variety in the scenario design. Even in the first story, you'll encounter some pretty crazy stuff. From an attack in your owner's bedroom, to a mad scramble over a trash pile, possibly even a wild ride in a red wagon using completely different mechanics from the rest of the game. Choosing to have all of this laid out in a book-style format is absolute genius. You get beautiful illustrations on the left, and all of the special rules you need for this particular map on the right. My last point is again a mix, but it tends to lean a bit towards con, and that's the way the dice system works. It's pretty fun to pull dice out of the bag and have to deal with the random results you get. And I love the push your luck aspect of choosing how many dice of the appropriate color to roll to try to get a result. But on the negative side, it can be really frustrating when you only need a die that will let you attack somebody right next to you, and you keep on drawing the wrong color, pretty much wasting your turn sometimes. This problem gets really bad in later scenarios, with a combination of terrain that can't be crossed without certain colors, and enemies that are attacking from long range. I can't communicate how frustrating it was in later scenarios with melee characters to have to skip their turn again and again just because they could not cross over and actually engage the enemy. Harrison, can you use your loudest voice?
I really like stuffed Fables because the animals are very cute and they are very, very cool.
Do you think the game is always fun or do you get bored sometimes?
Always fun.
Even when it goes really long?
Yes.
A big thank you to my 5-year-old Harrison. We played through the entire campaign together, and I'm sad to say that I'm not quite as positive on the game as he is. Stuffed Fables gets a lot of things right, and I do enjoy it more than Mice and Mystics from the same publisher and designer. That said, I really struggle with who the audience is for this game. Harrison, a 5-year-old, has the stories targeted directly to him, but the gameplay kind of drags. I actually have to rush through the story, change the rules, and sometimes just end missions early to keep him involved in the game. If you aren't willing to do that, to improvise the story on the fly, you might not enjoy the game as much with a young child. But if you're playing it with somebody older, like a teenager or other grown adults, I don't think you're going to enjoy it that much. The story really isn't for you, and there isn't that much tactical depth compared to other dungeon crawlers. So in short, I do recommend the game if you have a small child and are willing to change things to make it fun along the way, but otherwise I think you might want to pass on Stuffed Fables.
Good gaming, everyone!
All right.